Welcome to Golf and the Good Life, your guide to golf travel across the pond. I'm DJ Jones. He is Connor Evers, and today we are headed to Edinburgh. Hard to imagine it's taken us 40 episodes to talk about the capital of Scotland, Connor, but here we are. Before we dive in, we'd love to hear what's the latest up at H&B HQ.
Deej, all good. Can't believe how fast the season is going, coming into early September groups. And like I said in the last episode, finishing up some of those logistical plannings for October groups. And man, we are working somewhat heavily on 2026 groups as well, kind of getting that preemptively booked in and not booked in, but kind of starting the preliminary plans with that with groups. I can't believe it, but it's just the way the world is with golf travel overseas. But all good here, and like I always do, a few shout outs to some of my groups, some that have returned from expeditions across the pond. Members from Medina Country Club, Austin Country Club, Houston Country Club, Telluride Country Club, Mid Lothian Country Club, and Copper Hill Country Club. Not a golf club, all country clubs.
A lot of country clubs.
But yes, very much. But those are just from a few groups, and had a lot more travel and return and have enjoyed themselves. Weather's kind of starting to cool off, I'll say, kind of late August, which is good. Kind of mid 60s. A couple days we're kind of in the low 70s, but all good overseas, Deej. But appreciate the introduction and looking forward to talking about the capital of Scotland today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny, it might be getting a touch cooler. I'm not, but the sun has been, or at least from what I'm seeing on the field reports that are coming in, a lot of sunglasses in use here lately, which is a good thing because I think it's been somewhat wet in some of the areas early part of the season. But so far, so good as far as that goes. But yeah, we're talking Edinburgh today, and actually, it's going to be today and the next episode because this entire region between Edinburgh and East Lothian, which is sort of, if you're looking at the map, you've got Edinburgh. We're talking about this and the area that kind of stretches out along the coast to the east. This is some of the most golf-rich area in the world, really. I mean, it's called Scotland's Golf Coast for a reason. Actually, it was funny, not long ago, I think it was sometime last year, Jamie Kennedy with Golf Digest, he played all of these courses along the coast as like one giant course. He played it as like one hole at each course, and he walked the whole way. It took like 17 hours or something. But it just shows that once you get out to the edge of the city on the east side of town, it's basically one long golf course for miles and miles and miles, which is really great from a golf and the good life standpoint. And then, of course, you've got the city center of Edinburgh with all of the history and heritage and so forth that's there. So today we're going to focus on the golf today, and then come back next episode and talk about the good life aspect. I'm sure there will be some golf mixed in there as well. There always is, but this area, it gets a lot of attention because, well, there are two of the most sought after tee times in Scotland within just a few miles of each other. And then it gets a little notoriety each year when the Scottish Open comes to town at Renaissance Club. Unfortunately, Renaissance no longer accepts visitors, so we're not going to talk a whole lot about them today. But needless to say, it shines a spotlight on this region, and all of which leads to it being a pretty popular choice. Connor, from a planner's standpoint, what does someone need to kind of factor in as they're getting going in the planning process and they're hoping to come to this area?
The two courses that really kind of move the needle and change things when it comes to the timing of planning and the planning perspective overall, even if you're going to a different area throughout Scotland, is the West Links and North Berwick, as well as Muirfield. So let's start with the West Links North Berwick. And I'm talking, when I'm talking about this, if you're listening to this podcast in a different year, it could be 10 years from now, who knows? This is for bookings in 2024 for play in 2025. So again, it could change a little bit. For all we know, in a few years, it could be 2 and 3 years from booking out. But I'm talking about bookings for 2025. So this past kind of spring, when groups were looking to book the West Links and North Berwick again for next year, we were able to put groups on hold for intended play on certain days for next year in March. And usually confirmations and when the course actually fully started to open was April. So again, April for the year prior of intended play is when kind of those bookings started. And when I was over in 2022, I met with Sally, there, our friend that helps a lot of our groups. And just because of a lot of things with No Laying Up and a few other groups that have gone there, the notoriety of the club and just the popularity of it is increased. So because of all the play and guest play, visitor play, I should say, they've limited a little bit of the play. Bookings now Monday through Friday are only 11 to 12:30, as well as 2:10 to 3:30. Course is closed on Saturdays, and it's only afternoon times on Sundays. So it's limited availability. So again, the club's opening in April the year prior, and now just those tee times are available each week. So just with that, being said, as soon as possible is kind of when you're wanting to get into to North Berwick, and it's so fun. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the club and the experience. I know DJ will go into some more details, but it's one of our favorites, one of our members' favorites, and favorites amongst the staff here at H&B as well. So it's a really fun spot. And like I said, if you want that, definitely get on top of it. Prior year. And next up is Muirfield, and the booking process has changed. I wouldn't say dramatically, but significant, if you will, throughout the past few years. Muirfield is now on an application process rather than a direct tee time. So North Berwick, you put your names in, say 4 people, great, you've got the tee time. At the Honorable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, Muirfield, it's a little bit different now. They've tried to just, again, with demand of other things, they've kind of tried to level the playing field with getting times. And because it's an application, it's not a guarantee. So some groups may not be successful. And for the booking process, again, for tee times in 2025, and we're booking this in for 2024, the year before, you were able to send in your requests for that application. The application opened up around the 3rd week of February, and the results came out around the 1st week of April. Tour operators are given about a week and a half advantage, a head start, if you will, comparatively to the general public, which is nice. So it goes back to potentially booking with an operator such as us. And the other kind of big factor at Muirfield is there's a couple different options of playing the club. And you can change between playing an 18-hole day, so morning 4 balls, and then the other option with the 36-hole full day package, which is morning 4 balls and an afternoon foursomes, or what we call alternate shot. And usually with that 36-hole day, you have lunch in the clubhouse. So it's a fun day, but there is limited availability, as we talked about. Tuesdays and Thursdays are the only days each week that Muirfield is open for visitor play. 48 golfers each day for the 36-hole package and 32 golfers for the 18. So even just 2 days a week, but there's limited availability as well. So it just goes back to getting on top of it the year prior. And the other kind of thing I'll talk about a little bit from the planning perspective is the lodging options and kind of where you stay. Obviously, we'll talk about Edinburgh a little bit, as well as staying out in East Lothian. And there's pros and cons to both. So staying out in East Lothian, where the golf is essentially, a lot of groups enjoy the marine and lawn property, Marine North Berwick, which is right on the golf course essentially at North Berwick. And from that perspective alone, it's great. You've got limited drive times. A lot of those courses, I mean, you could practically walk to the first tee at North Berwick. Muirfield's 10 minutes away. Gullane's like 8 to 10 minutes away. Everything is very close, which is great. Give or take with traffic, you're about an hour or so back to the airport. But the other kind of thing of staying out there is kind of the good life outside of golf. And there's just limited things to do. Now, the opposite of staying in Edinburgh, you can walk to plenty of pubs and restaurants. There's great touring, lots to do at night. And you got that, but you also have that 40 to 50-minute commute out to East Lothian to play golf. Dunbar is about an hour drive, so it's a little bit further from that perspective as well. So like I said, there's pros and cons to staying out in East Lothian closer to the golf or in Edinburgh. I'd say it just depends on the group and your preferences from off the golf course. So I would say those are the planning perspectives, again, with Muirfield, North Berwick, and where you stay.
Yeah, well, if I'm hearing it all correctly, I mean, it really comes down to 2 key things. One is, are you going to stay in Edinburgh or North Berwick? And 2, getting your application and your tee time squared away at Muirfield and North Berwick. I mean, that's really it in a nutshell, making those choices and then going from there. We'll cover the good life stuff in some big time detail next episode. I like both ways. I'm going to Edinburgh in October, but I usually am based in North Berwick when I'm there. There are a few great restaurants there. Some of my favorites, actually. Shout out to the folks at Herringbone in North Berwick, but not to now. Now I'm going on a tangent thinking about food. Thanks. But back to the golf. This is essentially one giant stretch of great links golf. And, the two courses that I'm going to focus on, number one has to be Gullane. Gullane actually has three courses. Gullane number one is the one that essentially gets most of the notoriety. But they've hosted the Scottish Open a couple times, and it was actually a composite course that they played. A couple of the holes from number two were used to complete that course. But Ricky won one of those. I can't remember who won the other, but it's just pure golf. All three courses, they're kind of all set along the side of and in the shadow of Gullane Hill. And it's basically like playing a roller coaster. The opening holes play essentially straight uphill. Number one is kind of like a gentle uphill, but hole number two on Gullane number one, not to be confusing, sorry, is it's about a 400-yard par four, and driver may not be enough depending on what, how the wind is playing that day. It is severely uphill. You will get a workout at least on the first several holes at Gullane number one, and then it kind of crescendos at the seventh tee, which has to be one of the best spots in Scotland from a view standpoint. It stretches out before you, and you've got Edinburgh off in the distance looking one way. You've got Muirfield basically behind you looking the other way. And then if you were to look essentially kind of in between those two views, you're looking at the southern shores of the Kingdom of Fife. On a clear day, you can probably see Dunbarney Links. Just an absolutely incredible view. And what's great about the seventh in particular is if it's playing downwind, it's liable to be the longest drive you ever hit in your golfing career because it plays straight downhill, and if it's playing hard and fast, there is nothing to stop it except for a couple bunkers. And if you avoid those, it's going to go for miles. But just some great terrain at Gullane. I think it's the ninth is a par three that is essentially encased in bunkers. A great little hole. And then along the coast there are actually some old World War II fortifications along the shore, which is kind of neat to see. If you have some extra time and you can book it in advance, there's a little museum there called the Heritage of Golf Museum. This was curated by a gentleman named Archie Baird, who was a longtime member of the club. He was a past club captain. He wrote a book about the club and golf in the area. Unfortunately, Mr. Baird passed away, I think at like 95, 96 a few years ago. But the museum carries on, but it is a by appointment only type situation. And the collection in there is absolutely incredible, in terms of old clubs and balls and so forth, and just all kinds of art and prints. It's a really neat experience if you can make that happen. And then the clubhouse there at Gullane, if you get done and you need a bite to eat, the food is solid. I had some great fish and chips there the last time I was in Gullane over in the fall. But then the second one to talk about has to be North Berwick, as Connor was just sort of detailing. What hasn't been said about North Berwick? It is as magical as it gets. Some places are, you don't want to actually experience them because they won't live up to the hype. North Berwick lives up to the hype, at least if the sun is out. Maybe maybe if you're playing in a hurricane or something, it may not be a whole lot of fun, but it's just quintessential Scottish links golf. The opening hole, the tee's pressed up against the ocean. There's nothing to it. It's just a short par four, but the approach is like straight uphill to this green that's up on this knoll. And you kind of have to, if you're pushing a trolley, you've got to get some running going to get yourself up that hill. It sometimes you get up there and the view stretches out and you see basically the whole course ahead of you. And it's like, this is what I'm playing today. This is absolutely unbelievable. But the story of North Berwick really comes down to the closing stretch. I mean, in my view, it's the best back nine anywhere, hands down. There is no other back nine that I want to play more than North Berwick. And in the modern age of Instagram, it's as Instagrammable as it comes. I mean, you've got the 13th with the green tucked behind, the wall. There was a viral video not long ago of a gent that banked it off of the opening in the wall, and it ricocheted to like a couple feet. Yeah, 14. You hit a blind approach up and over a hill, and you get to the top, and the green is practically falling into the ocean. You've got the original Redan, which, depending on the wind, you might need driver. 16 is the wildest green you're ever going to see in your life. And then 17, you're hitting your approach back to that original knoll on the first green. And you get to the top and you're just like, you just don't want it to end. But North Berwick, like Connor said, it has, not only is it a top 50 course in the world these days, but every year when the Scottish comes to town right down the street, it says a whole lot that Jordan and Ricky and everybody who's playing in the Scottish, really, they don't go play a practice round at Renaissance. They go play North Berwick. And that tells you everything you need to know about North Berwick and maybe where they need to be hosting the Scottish in general. That might not earn me some fans at the tour, but whatever. But it's just a magical place. And then you go inside and the bar is upstairs, and you can kind of, there's like these little doors that you can walk out, or you can at least open up and kind of look down the links. It's just incredible, Connor.
It is. Yeah. It's so funny because like you said, does it live up to the hype? And some places don't, I'll be honest, or maybe our reviews for our members, have that perspective. But almost every single time people are like, wow, yeah, we knew it was going to be good, but didn't realize it was going to be that good. And closing stretch, I 100% agree with you. And I'll leave some of my comments to the end of that as well, from some of our memories. And then next up, we're going to talk a little bit more about Muirfield. I know we went through already the booking process there, how it all works from that perspective from each day. But talk a little bit about the course. I played it 2 years ago and had a great day. The weather was actually beautiful. It was like late October and a little breeze. Sun was out. And to your point, like you said, Deej, when we got out of there, we were staying at Marine North Berwick that night. You can see Fife like from East Lothian. I couldn't believe it. And someone pointed out to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, not from the course itself. You don't have any ocean views or anything from the course, but just outside of it. So side note to that, it's pretty cool. But the course itself is very uniquely routed. Going out, you play essentially in a circle. The ninth hole is the par five, comes back to the clubhouse. You can stop there, and then 10 and then in, all play essentially within the circle. So it's pretty uniquely routed from that perspective, and you get to play pretty quickly just because everything's fairly close to each other, which is really nice. I will say, I mean, the bunkering at Muirfield is some of the best I've ever played, even outside of Great Britain, Ireland, here in the States and elsewhere. It is just bunkered incredibly well. And, I know we talked about kind of the process of potentially having that lunch in between. And I like to tell groups, definitely do it. Go in, have your lunch, and walk around the clubhouse. We ate pretty quickly just so we'd have a chance to look at some of the memorabilia, the original rules of golf. It's a great experience. The clubhouse and everything inside is good, and just the memories you have, just as good as the golf course itself. The members' experience coming through the gate, all those good things as well that come along with it. The fun thing too that I always loved is like the merchandise there, the HCEG logo. They don't have Muirfield under it for the members, but they do have Muirfield under it for their visitors. Kind of like how Pine Valley does their logo too. So it's fun. It's kind of cheeky on that. It's a great experience. Let everyone definitely go there and play it.
Well, it's the single best day in golf. Morning four ball, lunch, afternoon foursomes, playing a game that we're not accustomed to, and that, quite frankly, some folks don't like because we're not used to it. Straight up, we hear that from time to time,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Everyone, we like what we like, and that's totally understandable. But you touched on the routing. It's really cool how, because of how it's routed, the wind essentially kind of changes direction throughout the round. Whereas right down the street at North Berwick, you're well, it kind of twists a couple times, I guess, but with so many links courses, you're playing essentially wind direction one way and then wind direction the other way coming home. But yeah, it's really great. But this is Scotland's Golf Coast, and we've talked about it so often here on the podcast that it's the marquee places that take you overseas, but so often it is that lesser known course that ends up really making that core memory sort of thing. And when it comes to the courses here in East Lothian, there are two in particular that seem to do that consistently for our members. Number one is Dunbar. You know, Connor mentioned it. It's a little further afield than the rest. It's about a half hour or so from North Berwick. So, you know, sometimes that makes it, unfortunately, the odd course out. You know, you play the big three, if you will, in there, and then you move on to another area. But if you're wise enough to play Dunbar, it is as classic of a links golf experience as it gets. The other has to be Kilspindie. I've never met or talked to anyone who has played Kilspindie and didn't love Kilspindie. It's it's only like 52, 5,300 yards, par 69. But again, it is classic links golf. And you know, it opens up with a par three. I mean, it's just as good as it gets. You know, you mentioned No Laying Up earlier. I believe that they played Kilspindie on one of their trips, and you know, it's always great to see some of those lesser known spots get some of the spotlight. And then Musselburgh, you know, you're talking the oldest golf course in the world, or at least the oldest continuously played golf course in the world. I'm sure there's some asterisk or something on there. But it hosted the Open half dozen times. It was one of the original members of the Rota once it went to a Rota, but it's a 9-hole course inside the local horse racetrack. If you want pure golf, go rent yourself a set of hickories in the clubhouse and go play it. You will not be disappointed with that decision. But there are so many others. Craigie Law. There's a couple courses at Archerfield, Lough Ness New. There's the Glen. I mean, there's just so many courses in this region. There's no shortage of choice. If there's any advice to give you, it is yes, it's those big three that are bringing you here, but leave some space for one extra. You'll because that's usually where the biggest highlight comes from.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And if you follow along with No Laying Up, specifically Tron Carter, he's kind of their travel guru. And he was over at the Open. He played a lot of golf over in the Ayrshire coast and then went over, did some ferries, played Corey. Of course, I've actually haven't heard of. I don't know if you've heard of it, TJ, but Shishkin and a few others. And then went over to East Lothian and he played Dunbar. And his first time he played it, he also played Muirfield and North Berwick. And he's like, I think I like North Dunbar like just as good as the others on the coast, from the views and just kind of the quirkiness. So there's so many good golf courses. I mean, everywhere. Obviously, you can have the check marks and and everything of trying to get them off the list, but these other ones we're mentioning, they're just as fun and what have you. So
Yeah, that's all really great stuff. I'm curious, any favorite stories or memories from playing the courses along Scotland's Golf Coast?
mine has to be with my good friend Larkin. I mean, we played North. I've played North Berwick a few times, and the last time I played it was 2 years ago, and with him, that was his first time playing it. We had an absolutely stunning day to start off, and then from 15, I think it was 15 fairway, or no, sorry, 16 fairway, and then it completely like downpour drenched. It was horrible. It was a little scary out there, but throughout our round, we were throwing golf balls down there. We were just kind of the only two out in the course, honestly, just because the weather that was probably about to happen. Everyone had a better idea of staying inside the clubhouse, drinking a pint instead. But we just threw golf balls down and just played a few in the 15, the Redan, and chipped around multiple times on 16, hit some bunker shots. We didn't even keep score. It was just so fun. And the course is spectacular. DJ said it perfectly. Closing stretch, that back nine is one of my favorites and a lot of our favorites, and I'd say yours too from overseas. Just a special place, and a lot of my favorite memories over in East Lothian are just there in general.
There's something about just wandering a links course on your own late at night, sun's fading down, and just hitting bump and runs and shots that you just wouldn't think to hit in the US, and just walking. You know, some of my best memories have been with a 7-iron and a putter, and I've just been walking with a ball, and that's really it. And I guess that's in a way that's golf, you know, as it was first played. But talking memories, I have two quick ones. The first was from just last fall. I get to North Berwick, and it's my first stop. I've just gotten in, and there's all these signs as on my drive into town about storm warning, storm warning. Well, they had a winter storm blowing through, and granted, it was late October, but if you're not familiar, they actually name their storms in the winter over there, just like we name hurricanes. So I show up, and Storm Babette arrives the next morning. And it is every bit as bad as the hurricanes we have here in Florida. I mean, and it was 3 straight days, abysmal weather, some of the biggest waves out on the ocean that I've ever seen, and the courses are closed. Some of them had, had some storm damage, but when I go to North Berwick, I'm usually there for, like, a week at a time, and I rent this same Airbnb every time that is on the 18th fairway at North Berwick. And it's amazing. I mean, one of the times I actually had to let a window repairman in for the Airbnb owner because a drive had cracked the window in the bathroom. I mean, it's literally you step out of the gates of this place and it's onto the 18th fairway. But for 3 straight days, I'm stuck inside. And it's just absolute torture. After 2 or 3 days, the sun comes out, I go outside, and I decide foolishly that I'm going to attempt to fly the drone. Mind you, the sun is out, but the wind is still blowing. It got about 10 or 15 feet in the air, and it blows away. Now, that first and 18th green or first and 17th green that I described earlier, how it's up on a knoll, thank goodness it was up on a knoll because it crashed into the hill and stayed there. Lesson learned. Never, I'm not ever going to do that again. But what ended up made that night so special wasn't crashing the drone. It was that everybody had been cooped up indoors for days, and it was like they all converged on the links. All the families and the dogs and the bike riders and just everyone. It was like they just said, "Let's go on a walk." And the place they chose to do it was North Berwick, and they just walked along the course. All kinds of people, all over the place, and the sun was just gorgeous, and it was just like this is the community aspect of golf over
Yep.
here that we don't experience there. Quick story two has to be my very first trip over, I don't know, 8-10 years ago, something like that. I go to Musselburgh, and I get done with my day, and I'm kind of just walking around taking photos, and I stumble onto the clubhouse for what I later learn is the Musselburgh Old Course Golf Club. The course itself at Musselburgh is basically a public 9-hole course, but there's this golf club that's sort of attached to the club. And I was taking a photo of, they have this engraving on the side of the wall that is the open winners at Musselburgh. So I'm taking a picture of it, and this gentleman knocks on the window and he waves me in. And I'm like, oh, I'm probably not supposed to be here. And so I wave my hand up and I start to turn around, and he knocks harder and he waves more animatedly to come inside. It's like, I don't have a choice. He opens the door. This gent bear hugs me. Welcome to our club. Come on in. Have a pint. We'd love. Where are you from? Here's our guest book. We would love to have you sign our guest. Like, and I'm just a guy walking the street, and I probably spent an hour in there just listening to these folks talking and having a pint, and again, the community aspect. And again, it's so much of these trips, the golf is great, the good life is great, but so much of it comes down to the people. And
Yep.
that was the reminder there. So, Connor, this has been a great part one of Edinburgh. Anything to add before we wrap it up?
No, I loved it. That was fun. Looking forward to the next one, chatting about all the good life offerings. But you're definitely right there. I mean, all those just cool experiences with the people. They love showing off their facility. The members are so proud of their club and what they do, and it's just so fun. Where like the clubs are so ingrained in like local culture, and the golf is just in general too. It's almost like they built the course first, and more than likely it may have been, and then everything else is built around it. And it's just shows how like important that is. And wish we had a lot more of that here in the States, but that's why we go over there. And I'd say the last thing, if you're looking to play Muirfield or North Berwick in 2026, email us right now.
He's right. You touched on this earlier about 2026. We're getting emails from the golf clubs about opening their books for 2026. I mean, we're not even done with the 2024 season yet, and here we are. So 2 years out. Who would have thought that? But that's where we are. But As usual, thanks for tuning in. If you missed anything along the way, we'll link to all kinds of stuff in the show notes. We have some guides on our website to Edinburgh and the golf courses. I'll throw that Jamie Kennedy Golf Digest link in there. Lots of great stuff to pull from if you need to. But if you have any questions, DM us on social media or send us an email, golf@haversham.com. Otherwise, thanks as always for tuning in. We'll be back again soon with another episode from Edinburgh. But until then, we wish you plenty of golf in its finest and life at its best.